everybody, this is DearMamaSal, and it's Friday morning, and of course that's a day off for me, and I'm on my way to my doctor. And before anybody gets worried about that, I'm absolutely fine. I'm just going to top up my meds. When you get to my age, you sort of rattle a bit when you walk because of various medications you need to take. So it's a very crisp morning, and yet it is 9 degrees Canadian and 48 American. So, there are a lot of people out this morning walking their dogs. Good for them. And the reason I've decided to vlog is a couple of things happened on the broadcast yesterday that made me want to just talk about this a bit more. Boy, maybe everybody and their dog is out today. Probably passed about 7 people already walking their dogs on this beautiful morning. Presumably they've already had breakfast, which is more than I have. Oh well. But before I do that, I thought I'd give you a doofus report, and it's not mine. Laurie said that I could add her doofus report to help people smile today. So, listen to this one. You're going to love this. So, Laurie's got a car that is slightly older, and for some reason it's got a bit of an issue with its trunk closing. And for those of you in England, that would be a boot. So, it's been sort of partially open for at least a month. Something wrong with the mechanism. So anyway, she was busy talking with her son, and he sort of leant on it in a certain place and closed it, and she was so fascinated by that, she said, hang on a second, do that again. And with that she opened the trunk again. And guess what? It wouldn't close again. The poor thing. How many of you can relate to that? Wow. And you know why she wanted to open it again was so she could learn exactly where to push it so that it worked. Not realizing that this was not the way to go. Anyway, really quite funny. Thank you for sharing that, Laurie. It's an important one. So, on the broadcast last night, we had somebody talk about a very difficult issue. Very difficult issue indeed. And that has to do with a family that grew up with an abusive father. And so that's the start of it. And he was an alcoholic and abusive. So he hit the children. Well, we all know that is something that scars children for life. Unless they have very, very good therapy for probably a long, long time. So, the dynamic was that we had a wife that was brave enough to get up and get out of the situation with her children. Now, you got to give it 10 out of 10 for that. So, but also, this whole thing gets more complicated. Because, sorry, I'm stalling here because I've been driving my way to my hair appointment, and I'm not going to my hair appointment. So I've just had to think there, where am I going to shift this? Never mind, this is good. Anyway, so now the issue has to do with a whole family that's been affected by the behavior of this one man. Worse than that, the son grew up learning from his father how you treat women. And that as far as the father was concerned, you understand, women's job was just to cook and look after him. He was of the old school mentality that was, my job is to work, your job is to do everything else. I bring in the money, you do everything else, sort of thing. Well, so now you've got a son who believes he has an entitled life, but the story got worse. The story got worse because the daughter was severely injured at the age of 14 and ended up that the doctors made a mistake, and in making the mistake she ended up unable to walk. So this is a pretty complicated set of things that are going on in this family. Add to that, the brother was emotionally unstable and under treatment for some severe situations. But now, the reason that I want to talk about this is because the brother is holding the whole family hostage in one way or another. And for example, you know, I was hearing last night that he can go into the kitchen and just make a total mess and leave it, because as far as he's concerned, that's not his job to tidy it up, it's somebody else's, because that's what he learned. He goes out and earns money and yet claims poverty. There are all sorts of very negative issues around this young man. And basically, when you boil it down to it, he hasn't grown up. He's still thinking like a child, not thinking like an adult. So, what I want to talk about is how often this happens and why it happens to some degree. And here's the sad story. The sad story is that when the daughter got incapacitated, she spent a lot of time in hospital. And obviously the mother was with her, leaving the son at home with the father, who had no parental skills that I can hear of. his idea of getting anything done was to hit people. And so the brother really does resent the sister. And in a way, if you think very clearly about it, you can understand why. She got to have love and attention, and he got to get the father. Now, was it the sister's fault? No. But he blames the mother. But he also, at some level, blames the sister. Because he hasn't done enough therapy to understand that this was not an intent. This was an emergency situation that required the attention that it got. So, because of his fragile mental state, the mother is very unwilling to put down any boundaries. Remember, we were having this discussion about boundaries the other day, and that's what brought this up. She's very unwilling to put down any boundaries for fear of triggering something worse. Understandable. But the sister understands that you cannot continue to play his game, because then he manipulates the whole family. Not only that, he's meant to be paying rent and isn't. Not only that, he's meant to be paying back a family loan, which he isn't. And yet, from what I've heard, he earns more money than the two other people put together. Nice life if you can get it. So, how does anybody end up in this situation? Well, they end up in that situation because they are allowed to do those behaviors. And I don't care if you have some level of mental illness. It doesn't give you the right to manipulate people. I know an awful lot of people who have some level of mental illness and behave like adults and don't use it, as an excuse or as a weapon, because when you use it as a, you don't love me anymore and I hate you and I'm going to kill myself type scenario, that's a weapon. That is a weapon. So, worse than this, because they're in the States, the mother and daughter do not have, the daughter has medical protection, I think. The mother doesn't. So, I ended up having some compassion for the boy, because even though my reaction to begin with was, boy, you need to put down some pretty strong boundaries, I then started to sort of process through about what had happened to the son. And yes, really, there was part of me that was compassionate of his side of the story. However, I look at it this way. How many famous people had mental illnesses, including Churchill and all sorts of people like that? They had mental illnesses and yet managed to act like adults and be responsible and do all those sort of things. So they still managed to pay their bills, to be ethical, to have integrity. And if you don't believe me, just Google in celebrities or famous people with mental disorders, and you'll be shocked at how many very functioning people have mental illness. Mental illness doesn't mean you're stupid or incapable. It means that you have a chemical imbalance. And they give you pills to top up the imbalance. It's not a ticket to not do anything or to be useless. Right? Do you understand the difference of this? This is not a ticket to do nothing. And if you're not functioning properly, that means that you're on the wrong meds. I mean, they haven't found the right cocktail of meds. So anyway, so this goes back to my question was that the problem when you go into a situation that's abusive like this is that at some level, and this is my description of it, and you've probably heard me refer to it before, and I'm going to refer to it again. My picture of this for other people is that you literally are traveling along, emotionally developing like any other child would, and then you hit a catastrophic event. That is catastrophic to the child. It may not be catastrophic to the adult because each of us is different. But you hit a catastrophic event and you end up realizing that the world is not a safe place. So you stop developing like a normal child and believing that adults are safe people or whatever it is that normal children believe. Mummy and daddy are king and queen, whatever they believe. But you stop believing that because inherently you know that the way you just got treated was not right. And if your own parents can treat you that way, then what about the strangers? So you learn not to trust. And you go from a place of normal growth like this, where you go into a place of survival. It's on a different plane. And some of you will recognize it really well. This is my description of it. This is not a medical description. And so the way I describe it to people is you go from having normal feelings and normal reactions to being numb. A lot of things happen and you go numb. You just don't have any feelings at all around these things. You're scared to have feelings because that's how you get hurt. Or, worse than that, some of you click into that mode and you end up fearful. You're scared to do anything for fear that you will upset somebody and they will be angry with you and therefore you will have punishment. The kid fears the punishment. It's more inner child. Very severe inner child stuff. And as I said, the difficulty with this sort of reaction is there isn't a pill that's going to take you out of it. And that's what most people want, is I just want to take the pill and feel better. Well, no, you can't just take the pill and feel better, because what this is about is cognitive. It's what your brain is thinking. It hears A and equates it to be B. It sees this body language and interprets it to be angry. All these sort of funny little things go on. And it's not something that you can just get rid of by taking a pill. You need to do a lot of work on yourself. You need to do a lot of reading about this stuff. You need to do a lot of therapy about this stuff. And eventually you will start to, as I said in a broadcast not so long ago, you're never going to wipe out the tapes. What you do is you learn to run a new tape that is correcting the ill thinking of the first tape. Does that make sense? In other words, you're always going to have that original tape there, but what you do is you learn to counteract what the first tape is telling you. For example, if the first tape is telling you you're a bad girl, and that's why you get punished, because that's probably what a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old believed, then your adult tape says, no, you're not. There was a time in your life when you believed that, but it's not true. So that's when you start rewriting the tapes, but you don't actually rewrite them, right? Because the first tape will always be there, as some of you know. But what you do is you learn to counter it. That's called cognitive therapy, where you learn to correct the ill thinking of the thoughts in your mind. Now, you didn't get these thoughts by being stupid or whatever. You got these thoughts by being a child in terror. At some level, you were traumatized. And I always think that these things are all linked in. You can be traumatized as a child on a number of issues, and it isn't necessarily being beaten. I know one person whose mother, whenever there was a thunderstorm, put them in a cupboard to protect them. Can you imagine that? And now this adult, who by the way is older than I am, to this day has claustrophobia. Has a fear of these confined spaces. Well, guess why? When she was terrified, she was locked in a cupboard. You know, to a young child, they don't understand what a thunderstorm is. But if the result of that noise outside is that you get thrown into a cupboard and the door shut on you, boy, that impacts your psyche. So all these things happen to the child, and they continue to affect us as adults. Unless two things happen. Number one, we do the therapy, and number two, unless the adults in our life don't tolerate the childish behavior. And, you know, and say, oh, poor thing, you know, he's suffering from A, B, and C, so we have to allow X, Y, and Z. No. Unless a doctor has told you otherwise, then what's happening is you are being manipulated by a child who hasn't grown up. You continue to treat him like a child, so therefore he continued to behave as a child. So, I'm going to continue this on the way back. And I want to thank Roseanne, who actually asked me whether I would put this together. And I said to her, oh gosh, no, it's such a big issue. I wouldn't be able to do it in a 20-minute drive to work. And she said, do it in a number of drives. Good thinking, Roseanne. This is Dear Mama Sal saying bye for now.